Have you ever taken a road trip? Just jumped in your car, hit the road, and left your problems behind you? Come with us on our virtual road trip this week and learn some new vocabulary. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. So Craig, how are things?
Things are very well. I didn't drive here today. I took the bus. We're recording in Reza's flat. But it's really good to be podcasting about road trips. And as always, it's fantastic to be with you here, Reza. Before we begin, we must say hi to our friend Paula, who brought us some wonderful coffee and chocolate from Colombia. We have just tasted it and it is lovely. Thank you very, very much. Excellent coffee, excellent chocolate. My favorite was the 70%.
Yes, I agree with Craig. Superb coffee. Really, really good because it combined smoothness with an intense, really good flavor. Very good coffee, Paula. And I agree with Craig. I preferred the stronger of the three chocolates, although the other two were really good as well. And they melted beautifully in the coffee when I dunked them. I admit I dipped them, I dunked them in the coffee, and then they were just sublime. So thanks very much, Paula.
And if you're a new listener and you're wondering why we're talking about chocolate and coffee, thank you for joining us. We are going to help you with your English and take it to the next level, beginning with a voice message from Leah in Australia, who motivated us to speak about road trips.
Hello, Reza and Craig. I finally have the courage for record a message to you guys. So my name is Leah. I'm living in Australia currently in the state of Tasmania. I'm doing a master's degree in teaching in uni at the moment. Well, firstly, I want to thank you for everything, for all your hard work doing this podcast. I think it's so good and I've been find myself laughing in the stream while I'm listening to you guys. So I've been listening to the podcast for like 2 years because I arrived in Australia 2 years ago and I couldn't speak any English and I started listening to your podcast and I couldn't understand a single word. But I've been practice and listen to you guys maybe weekly and I've been improving a lot and I can understand every single word that you said. Well, I want to suggest you a topic. I think you have talked about everything possible topic, but I think maybe you can talk about Pan American Highway. I'm still a backpacker, a traveler, so when I finish my degree, I would like to go and doing it. And I think they have really interesting facts that you can talk about it in the podcast and maybe motivate some people for travel as well. Travel is always good. Thank you so much again. You are doing a really, really good job. You are great. You are the best. Thank you for everything.
Thank you for your lovely, lovely message, Leah. So nice to hear from you in Australia. And thank you for the idea. We're not going to speak specifically about the Pan American Highway. We're going to speak about road trips in general. But before we do that, any comments on Leah's message, Reza?
Yes, it was a very nice message and a very clear message, and I understood everything you said. So, mission accomplished. That's the most important thing. Having said that, I did notice one or two things that we could correct. I think a couple of times I heard you say, I've been, and then instead of using an ing, you just used the infinitive. You said, I've been practice and I've been listen. But you have to say, I've been practicing with ing and I've been listening. Is that what you heard as well, Craig?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm really pleased, Leah, that you have been laughing in the street. But you said you were laughing in the street while I listen. While I'm listening, you should use the continuous, the ing form after while as well. While I was washing up, while I was listening, while I was walking, etc. while I was listening to your podcast.
You also said that finally, after 2 years, you have the courage, and you said the courage for record an audio message. But we should use the infinitive to the courage to record. Yeah, so infinitive, the courage to record a message.
Now, speaking of road trips, one thing that immediately came to my mind is one of my favorite films called The Blues Brothers. Have you seen The Blues Brothers?
Yes, I have. I love it myself. Yeah.
Wonderful film with some fantastic music. And in it, these two brothers want to get the band back together. They want to play music with musicians. And they're sitting in a car before they begin a road trip to Chicago, where they do a concert. And a quote from the film is where they're sitting in the car and one of them says, "Okay, it's 106 miles to Chicago. We have a full tank of gas, half a packet of cigarettes. It's dark and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it, Jake." Do you remember that scene in the film?
I do. Yeah, that's one of my favorite films where there's a road trip as well. Might you call that a road movie?
Possibly, although there's a lot more to it. It's not just them driving to Chicago. There's a lot of other, we could say, subplots or other things that happen. Can you think of any famous road trip movies that you've seen? There's obviously Thelma and Louise. Brad Pitt's in that film as well. It was one of his first where they drive across country.
Well, my favorite, without any doubt, is Easy Rider, which is a motorbike road trip, not cars, with Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda and Jack Nicholson. That's a classic. Do you know it?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's quite an old film now, but a very, very good film as well. And Mad Max, I think, is a road movie, a futuristic road movie. Have you ever been on a road trip, Reza? And if so, which was your favourite?
Well, it depends what you mean, Craig. If you mean that the objective was to follow a certain route, that's what you mean, really, isn't it? Yeah. When we talk about a road trip, it's the idea that we're going to follow a route in advance. Then, strictly speaking, I guess no. Although I have spent a few days traveling in a car, but that's not strictly speaking a road trip if you haven't planned it that way in advance.
What about when you went to Scotland? Was that a road trip?
I guess maybe a bit, yeah. But it was more the destinations that interested me. And while I was there, I found out how to get from one place to the other. Whereas, in my opinion, the true essence of a road trip is you know what roads you'll be taking in advance. And the objective is to follow those roads. That's a true road trip. Would you agree?
Yeah, it also implies you're going a long distance. You'll be stopping. And there's that idea of having a destination. But in my opinion, a good road trip is the important thing is the journey and the traveling, not so much reaching the destination, although that is important. It's the journey that's the exciting thing.
So I guess a true road trip, well, a good example would be what Leah mentioned. For example, the Pan American Highway. The whole point is you're on the Pan American Highway, and a highway is a type of road. Yeah, it's an important road. So the highway is the main feature of the journey. That's a road trip.
And I don't know much about the Pan American Highway, Leah, but I do think it's north to south and south to north, and it also goes into Mexico, I think, as being Pan American. It would do. So it's north to south or south to north, whereas Route 66, which is a very famous road in the USA, that goes from east to west and west to east, although now I think it's been replaced by a more modern road. Can you think of any other famous places to do a road trip?
For British people, the most popular one and the longest one would be from John O'Groats to Land's End. I should explain, in case you don't know, John O'Groats is a little place right up in the extreme north of Scotland. And Land's End is another little place, little village, in the extreme southwestern tip. So it's the furthest south you can get, in the southwestern tip of Cornwall in England. So that's going right from the north of Scotland down to the southwest corner of England. And that's called the John O'Groats to Land's End.
That will be a good road trip to do. That will be very interesting. One that I have done and has become very popular in recent years is around Iceland. You fly to Iceland. It's not a huge island. You can rent a car in Reykjavik and just travel around the edge of the island and do a complete circle. And that's a very, very interesting road trip to do.
I saw a documentary about that one just the other day. It looked fascinating. I guess there's a big difference between doing it in winter and summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, in winter, like you literally have to go over like glaciers and lakes of frozen ice, and it's not for those who are easily frightened. Let's put it like that.
It will be more difficult to do that in the winter, but you can keep to that road with a normal car. A word of advice for people who are thinking of maybe doing this: if you want to go off-road, which means you leave the road and go travel inside, away from the coast, you need to rent a 4x4 car, because some of the roads are not easy to go on if you have a normal car. So make sure you get a 4-wheel drive or at least a high Jeep so that you can go off-road and explore inside the center of the island.
I can think of one more road trip. It's not as impressive, perhaps, as the others we've mentioned, because it's not on such a grand scale. But in Ireland, people often talk about the Ring of Kerry road trip. So Kerry is a county in Ireland, and it has a lot of very beautiful, picturesque scenery.
It's in the south, isn't it?
It's in the south, yeah, kind of southwest. So there's an area with really outstanding scenery, and you can drive around the coast mostly and a little bit inland, and it'll take you just a couple of days. You could even do it in a day if you really wanted to. So it's not a really big road trip, but people say it's very beautiful.
We spoke about the Pan American Highway before. Highway is obviously a very wide road. It tends to be used more in American English, and also in American English you might hear the word freeway. Although in British English we tend to use the word motorway, which again is a very wide road with more than one lane. So maybe 2 or 3 lanes. You can overtake, you can pass other cars, and you can go fast on a motorway, a freeway, or a highway.
Well, once you've decided what highway, motorway, or freeway you're going to take, then you set off. So that phrasal verb, that's a verb with a preposition, set off, is a way of saying to start a journey, to set off.
And it tends to be a longer journey, doesn't it? For example, this morning I came to Razor's Flat and I left my house about 10 o'clock. But I wouldn't say I set off at 10 because it's not a long journey. It's a short bus ride. So to set off implies that you're going on a longer trip, a longer journey. And I made quite good time today. If you make good time on your journey, on your road trip, that means that you don't get delayed, there isn't a lot of traffic, and you arrive at your destination at the time you predicted or maybe earlier.
So Craig didn't get stuck in traffic. Yeah, he wasn't stuck in traffic. That's why he was able to make good time. But sometimes on the route that he takes from his house, at the rush hour, the busy time, it can be bumper to bumper. There can be a lot of cars and other vehicles, bumper to bumper. The bumper is that bit at the front and the back of your car that you could use to bump into something. So traditionally it was a piece of metal, but these days there's a good chance it's plastic or rubber, and it's to prevent the chassis, the main part of your car, being damaged. So instead of hitting the main body of your car, you'll hit the bumper if you collide with something. So bumper to bumper, imagine all the bumpers are touching. There's so many cars, there's no space between them.
And that tends to happen when people are on their way to work, they're going to work, or they're coming home, they're coming back from work. And that's the rush hour. So rush hour traffic is a strange expression because you think if you're rushing, you're going fast, but it's actually the opposite. If you get stuck in rush hour traffic, or we can say you hit HIT. You hit traffic, rush hour traffic, you go very, very slowly because the traffic is bumper to bumper. So it's a good idea to avoid the rush hour and travel outside of those hours. By the way, if you want to see a list of this vocabulary, go to inglespodcast.com for a list of these words.
Now, Valencia, where we are here, has a couple of ring roads. And I think most major cities these days will have some ring roads. So a ring, it's a circle, right? So a ring road is a road which is more or less a circular shape. In other words, it's not straight. It bends round and round and round and round to go around a city rather than going through the center. The ring road, or there could be more than one, there could be a smaller one and a bigger one, the ring roads avoid the traffic in the city center. So you can get from the south to the north, for example, without having to go through the center.
And the highway, the motorway, they are obviously wide roads with lots of lanes for traffic. And a main road also tends to be wide, M-A-I-N. So a main road in a country or a city has a lot of room, whereas if it's very narrow, which is the opposite of wide, you could call it a back road or a side street, the very small, narrow streets that are usually residential where people live.
I've heard that boys who live in the back streets sing quite well. Have you heard that, Craig?
Oh,
Yeah, the Backstreet Boys.
The Backstreet Boys.
Boys who live on the main road, they don't sing as well as boys who live in the back streets. They definitely don't.
That's a highway to hell, but we'll speak about songs later.
If you go down the back roads in the countryside, you'll probably be taking the scenic route. In other words, what you see, the scenery, that's SCENERY, the scenery will be very nice, probably on the back roads, the scenic route.
And if I have time, I much prefer to take the scenic route because I don't like driving on motorways. They're very boring. I much prefer to go through the countryside, even if it takes longer. I prefer the back roads, the countryside, the scenic routes. If I have a problem while I'm driving, then obviously I go to the side of the road, and we have a phrasal verb for that. It's to pull over. Pull over. So if you want to have a coffee or check your map or have a cigarette or change your tyre, if you have a flat tyre, then you pull over to the side of the road away from traffic. And the opposite is to pull out, another phrasal verb, to pull out into traffic.
Sometimes you have to pull over not because you want to, but because you've been ordered to by a police officer. So a common thing that a police officer will say to you if they want you to stop your car when you're driving, they'll get level to you so that you can hear them, and they'll say, pull over. So they're saying you have to slow down, stop and park at the edge of the road. They've ordered you to pull over.
They're not talking about your jumper or your sweater, are they? Because that's a synonym when it's a noun. A pullover is a jumper.
Unless it were the fashion police.
Unless they're the... Oh, very good. Very good. The fashion police. Now, you get tired if you're on a road trip, you're traveling for many, many, many miles or kilometers, and occasionally you want to stop, pull over, get out of the car to stretch your legs. Stretch, T-R-E-T-C-H. When you stretch your legs, you walk around, have a stretch, move your body, and stretch your legs.
Now, as Craig knows, I'm a little bit greedy. I eat too much. And sometimes when I get to a restaurant, I don't think, and I fill up on bread. I eat too much bread, and then there's hardly any room left for the rest of the meal because I filled up on bread. But Craig, if I talk about filling up my car, what am I talking about?
You're probably talking about these days getting a second mortgage or a bank loan so that you can go to the petrol station and put some petrol in your tank. Or if you're an American English speaker, put some gas in your tank. And you'd probably say to the petrol pump attendant, if there is one, if it's not self-service, you'd say, excuse me, can you fill it up please. Fill it up, which means to fill up the tank and put as much petrol in the tank as possible. Actually, last week was my wife's birthday, and she said, Craig, for my birthday, can you take me somewhere expensive? So I took her to the petrol station.
Craig, do you often take the long way home?
Sometimes I take a different way home just to be different, because I think it's good to change your habits from time to time, and that's sometimes longer, but you see different buildings, you see different scenery and different area. So yeah, sometimes I take the long way home. I don't go straight home.
Yeah, sometimes people take a different route knowing that it will take them more time, but they might want to avoid certain sites that they're tired of looking at, or places that have bad memories for them, or maybe they're in no rush to get home. Maybe they know they're about to have an argument with their partner and they're just buying time. They take the long way home, so it takes a bit longer to get there.
Speaking of being angry and arguing, there's an expression, road rage. R-A-G-E, rage is anger, a lot of anger. You get very, very angry. And this can happen when you're driving, especially, but not exclusively, when you're driving in the city, you're stressed, there's a traffic jam, bumper to bumper, lots of cars, somebody does something stupid and you get angry, and that's called road rage. Why do you think road rage is a thing? Why do people get angrier sometimes when driving than in the street, for example?
I don't know why, but it's true, isn't it, that some people who are normally very calm are very irritable when they get behind the wheel of a car. So to get behind the wheel of a car means to drive, to be the driver. It just makes some people really nervous for some reason.
I think maybe it's because of the glass around the car and we feel isolated, and it's a bit like being on Twitter or Facebook, that you're not face to face in person with someone. There's this screen, this protection, so you can shout and scream and be really angry, but you're not really in front of someone. Okay, let's look at some idioms and proverbs with the word road. Now, a road map, and if you're as old as I am, you might remember that we used to navigate with paper maps back in the day, before GPS and Google Maps. And if you have a road map for something, that could just mean a plan or a strategy. And sometimes you hear politicians speak about roadmaps, a roadmap for the economy, or maybe a roadmap for war, or some kind of plan or strategy that you're going to put into place.
Now, Craig, if you and I were in a bar right now, but we're not, but imagine, and I said to you, one more for the road, what would I be talking about?
Well, we're probably drunk and we shouldn't have another drink, but we're going to have one anyway. So it's usually the one you regret, that last whiskey, that last beer before you stagger into the road and fall into a taxi. So one more for the road is when you're having a good drinking session and you just feel like having one more drink before you go home.
Don't you think that curiously there's a cultural contrast between Spanish language and English language? For us, it's one more for the road, one more. But in Spanish language, it's always the penultima. It's never the last one. It's la penultima. Have you ever heard that? La penultima.
I have. And for non-Spanish speaking listeners, what does penultima mean?
That's the one before the last. In other words, the penultimate. So not the last one. The one before the last is.
So where is the last one? Is the last one at home?
It never arrives in Spain. You never get to the last one. But we are more honest and we say one more for the road. This is the last one. No more.
Reza, if you heard the expression middle of the road, if I say, hey, Reza, you're middle of the road, in my opinion, what do you think I could mean?
Well, I wouldn't consider it a compliment. It wouldn't be a great thing to say. Although there are worse things you could say, because middle of the road means not very exciting, not extreme, so not really interesting, not much to comment about. You're middle of the road. You're not extreme. There's nothing especially to take note of. Nothing that you're going to remember much about, either good or bad.
So it could be about a restaurant, perhaps, or a place that's not especially good, but it's not particularly bad. It's middle of the road. Also, perhaps you could hear that, do you think, with politics? I'm not extreme to the right. I'm not extremely to the left. I'm middle of the road in my political beliefs.
That's true, yeah. In politics, it has a different meaning. In politics, it's not necessarily meant in a pejorative way, is it?
Yeah.
Whereas in the other context, it is. It's like saying a little bit boring.
So imagine this, Reza. We're in the bar, we're drinking, we've had lots of pints of Guinness and a few Irish whiskies, and you say one more for the road, and we drink it, and then I say, Reza, it's time to hit the road. What do I mean by that? Hit the road. Am I going to get violent?
Hopefully he's not going to get violent. He's not going to use his feet or his hands to attack the road. It just means we have to get going. We have to start traveling to wherever we're going. So presumably we're going to need a road for that. That's when you say it's time to hit the road. In other words, it's time to start traveling.
Another expression with road or roads, all roads lead to Rome, which might translate directly into your language. What does that mean? All roads lead to Rome. Does that mean we're on a road trip when we say that?
No, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're in Italy or you have any intention of going to Italy, but originally it did. In the times of the Roman Empire, it seemed that all roads led to Rome. The Romans in the Roman Empire seemed to control everything. So it didn't really matter where you went. You were going to end up under the control or influence or the sphere of Rome. So it means that whatever you do, however you do it, it's all going to turn out, it's all going to end the same way. All roads lead to Rome.
So I could publish this podcast manually on a Sunday in the morning. I could wake up and publish this podcast, or I could schedule it using software so that it's released on Sunday. And that's what I do when I'm on holiday, for example, or I'm not in my house. But it doesn't matter if it's manually or automatically, because all roads lead to Rome. The result is the same and it's published at the same time.
Now, Craig, quite often I really do say to you at the start of a podcast, let's get this show on the road. Now, I don't want to go anywhere. What do I mean by that? Let's get this show on the road.
Well, it doesn't mean that we're going to sing, although sometimes we do rather badly, but to get the show on the road means to start, to begin. So you could say that at the beginning of a business meeting, for example. Hey, let's get this show on the road, or let's kick off this meeting. Let's start this meeting. Let's start doing this. Let's get this show on the road.
I imagine that expression comes from the fact that many years ago or centuries ago, many cultural events like the circus and things like that, they traveled around the country. So they had to go from one place to another. So they had to get the show, get all the equipment, get everybody ready on the road. Let's go and do what we're supposed to do. Let's do our job. Let's do what we've come here to do.
Exactly. And the opposite of that expression is another expression with road. It's the end of the road. So it's the end of the road for you, my friend. Now that could mean literally, but more often it's meant idiomatically. It just means it's over. It's the finish. And I get a picture in my head of two cowboys facing each other at noon, and they're going to have a gunfight. And one cowboy says to the other, "It's the end of the road for you, partner." That means you're going to die. So if something's the end of the road, it's the finish of something.
Another common expression is to be on the road to recovery. So to recover is to get better. So it isn't the end of the road. If you're on the road to recovery, things have been bad, but they're going to get better. It's not the end. You're on the road to recovery. Things are getting better.
And if you want to see all of these words, idioms and proverbs, go to inglespodcast.com, where you will see a list of these words on our website. Do you think this podcast is on a road to nowhere, Reza?
I don't think so, no. Because we have plenty of listeners. The numbers tend to go up every once in a while. So I wouldn't say it's a road to nowhere. A road to nowhere is when an effort's being made that's not going to achieve anything. So it's pointless. You're not going anywhere. The road doesn't go to a destination. It doesn't have a destination. It's pointless.
A waste of time.
A waste of time. But this podcast, I hope, is certainly the opposite of pointless. The whole point of this podcast is that you, listener, improve your English. So we're definitely going somewhere.
So we hope this will end well and that it will be a road to somewhere. And there's another common expression that is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So hell is the opposite of heaven. That's where the devil lives. It's a very bad place. And if it's paved with good intentions, that means there are good intentions everywhere. So paving or pavement is where you walk. Obviously, a road is paved. So the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Can you think of an example, Reza, where you'd use that?
Yeah, for me, it means that although your intentions were good, you didn't mean for anything bad to happen. It did. So, and nobody wanted things to go badly wrong. Their intentions were good. What they wanted was good, but it didn't happen. For example, imagine I have a friend and I've been warned that he hates surprises. All sorts of surprises. He does not like surprises. But I think, come on, everybody loves surprises. Not him, but I wouldn't listen. So I organize a surprise party for him. He comes home and we're all waiting in his house and we go, surprise, surprise. And he goes, oh God, I wasn't expecting this. Oh, I hate surprises. And not only that, he's so shocked that he has a heart attack because he really doesn't like surprises. Well, that's a hell then of a situation. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. It was his birthday. I wanted to give him a good time. My intentions were good, but the result is he's had a heart attack. I shouldn't have done it.
Or here's another example. Imagine there's a politician who wants to stimulate the country's economy. So this particular politician puts these fantastic, incredible economic measures in place, like cutting taxes, for example. But the currency goes down and the economy of the country is almost ruined and the bank has to intervene. Does that ring a bell with you, perhaps? Could that be an example of the road to hell being paved with good intentions?
That sounds very familiar to me right now. I can think of a specific country where that may be the case.
Yeah. So let's talk about road trips in general. What are the ingredients? What makes an enjoyable road trip, in your opinion?
Well, above all, the company. And the company could be no company, by the way. You could be on your own, alone. If that's what you wanted and that's what you do, that's great. But if you're with someone, for me, if the company's not good, the road trip is not going to be enjoyable.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Obviously, it would be nice if there's some lovely, attractive scenery and maybe some great music for your road trip. And it'd be nice to have a good car. I mean, much more enjoyable to have a road trip in an Aston Martin, for example, than a cheaper car.
You said lovely, attractive scenery. I would say yes. And also a lovely, attractive lady helps as well to go with the scenery for me.
No, that's a bad idea. You need to keep your eyes on the road. And it's all about the journey, not the destination. Where would you like to go on a road trip?
I think I would like to do the famous Route 66 in America. And also the one in Iceland, round the island. That sounds good as well. But so does the Pan American one. I'd like to try all of them. What about you?
I've always wanted to see Canada and more of the US, because although I've been to a couple of US cities, I haven't really seen the countryside and the national parks. So maybe I have to check where the Pan American Highway goes. So that probably would be a really good road trip to hire a car and drive the Pan American Highway.
And imagine then you were imagine you're going to go on the Pan American route. Who would be your ideal traveling companion on that trip? Or companions, you could have more than one. Who would it be?
A car mechanic? I have to say my wife, obviously. So, but maybe you, my friend, as well.
I
Yeah.
would enjoy it.
So 4 of us, or 5, including the car mechanic.
Me, you, your wife, and the mechanic. That sounds like the beginning of a joke, doesn't it? There's going to be a punchline.
It sounds like the beginning of a wonderful friendship. And I mentioned Highway to Hell as being a connection, a good music track to have in your car. Hit the Road, Jack is a famous song that you could play. And then the music from the Easy Rider film soundtrack. Can you think of any others?
Yes, The Long and Winding Road, that Beatles song,
Yeah.
which is a classic. And you wrote one, Craig, but I have to admit I don't know it. You suggested Fast Car.
Tracy Chapman.
Oh,
I've got a fast car. Da 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 da. Yeah, nice song.
I don't know it, actually.
I'll play it for you.
Okay. Craig, can I just say one thing before we end this podcast?
Of course.
There's a traditional Irish blessing which starts on the road. And originally it was said in Irish, but these days you're more likely to hear it in English. So you say it to someone that you meet on the road, someone traveling. You say to them, "May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand."
That's beautiful.
That's a traditional Irish blessing that you often say to people that you meet on the road.
We'll have that in the show notes, of course, at inglespodcast.com. And before we go, we'd like to invite you to practice your English by sending us a voice message. Do you have any interesting stories about road trips you've taken? And where would you like to do a road trip? Do you have any destinations in mind, like Leah from Tasmania? You can send us your voice messages by going to speakpipe.com, speakpipe.com/Inglespodcast.
If you like, you could send us an email. You can get Craig or myself. Craig is at craig@inglespodcast.com, and you'll get me at belfastreza@gmail.com.
And if you would like a course to help you with your English and pay for the course, you can find a selection on the Mansion Ingles store. That's store, store.mansioningles.net.
As we always do at the end of each episode, we'd like to give a big thank you to all those kind people who support us by donating money through the Patreon scheme. Patreon, that's Patreon. And what they do is they donate as little as $1.20 per month. The 20 cents is to cover the tax, the VAT. And as a way of thanking those people for being so generous, we give them instant access to recent audio transcriptions. If you're interested, there's a link in the show notes. Check it out. It's www.patreon.com/inglespodcast.
We don't have time to thank all of you individually for your support, but we would like to welcome and say thank you to our latest Patreon supporters. And they are Rosa Ayelon, Gerard, Javier Correa Zambade, Silvia, and Rodrigo Delgado. Thank you to you and to everyone who is supporting us. Thank you for listening this week. It's been lovely having you on the journey with us, but now we have to hit the road. So until next time, it's goodbye from Reza.
And it's bye-bye from Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.